You know, I talk a lot on this channel about the state of border security in places like Ukraine and Israel and even Yemen. But you know what I almost never discuss? Is border security here in the United States. And despite what foreign lobbies and American politicians try to tell me, border security in Israel and Ukraine are of no consequence to my daily life. That does not affect me. It does not directly impact me whether or not Israel or Ukraine can secure and defend their own borders. But you know what does affect me? You know what really depresses the hell out of me when I have to think about it? It's the fact that the American government has facilitated a transfer, an ongoing transfer of population from outside of the U.S. into the U.S., specifically to red states, via the southern border. We set a new record yesterday. 12,600 people were encountered, had encounters, so to speak, with Customs and Border Patrol at the southern border, whether it be, at any random place in the desert, along the Rio Grande, or at an actual port of entry. And while most of these people, I'm sure, have noble intentions and just want a better life for themselves, there is a reason why you can't just move to any country in the world that you want to and stay there forever, or even get in short term. But we here in America instead, what we do is we let people come in and we say, sure, we'll consider letting you stay, and in the meantime, go crazy. Here you go. Go wild. Go live in whatever red state you want. Go ahead, send your kids to our taxpayer-funded schools. Take food from our local food kitchens and food pantries. Accept our government welfare. And in the meantime, why don't you just form ethnic enclaves within the United States, where you can basically live as a citizen of your home country while enjoying all the benefits of living in what once was the richest and most prosperous country on earth. Just come in, consume more resources, take up more space, vote as long as you vote for the right guys, the blue boys who keep you here. Not that the red boys want to send you home. Quite the contrary, the red boys want you here, but for different reasons. And all the while, you will dilute our native culture, and eventually, as I've been told is the plan by leftists very proudly, you will replace us, and then the left will no longer have to worry about the Anglos or even the blacks, because they will have you as a permanent underclass. You see, the plan only works as long as you stay in your ethnic enclaves, as long as you stay in a legal gray area where you're basically left to do whatever you want, but also not really an American. You need to keep speaking foreign languages at home. You can't let your children grow up thinking that they're Americans or that they're a part of this society, because inevitably what happens is that over the generations they become more and more like the native population. And that is always the problem when you're trying to take over a country through migration. It has to be done very quickly and swiftly, so that doesn't happen, so that the invaders do not go native. Because when you have a measured gradual rate of migration, what you end up with is the one generation's migrants becoming the next generation's natives. And that's what's happened to people in America of Irish and Italian descent, for example, but who, within my grandparents' generations, the Italians and the Irish were still very much considered outsiders. They were the old ethnic populations. And what happened was they settled down, they learned to speak American English. Sure, in the case of the Irish, they technically spoke something that was called English, but it was far from American English. And the Italians spoke a foreign, Latin-derived language, much like the Hispanics of today. They also were Catholic. And what has happened is that over time, they speak less and less of the old languages. They more frequently attend Protestant churches, or sadly, no church at all. And the same thing tracks for people of Latin American origin. Those who are not engrossed in an ethnic enclave, those who live amongst other Americans within a generation or two, speak English at home, and oftentimes end up joining a Protestant church because, frankly, everyone else in their friend group, if they go to any kind of a church at all, it's probably going to be Protestant, and people assimilate into native cultures. That is the natural thing that happens. And so it is only with this massive rate, bringing in tens of thousands of people every single day, that you can really fundamentally change a culture. And let's be honest, that's what happened during the days of Ellis Island. The United States was being swamped by foreigners. That is why New York is the way it is now. New York used to be very much an English city. And today, to the extent that there are people that you'd consider white at all there, they are of Irish and Italian origin. And by the way, New York City is sort of an exception. When I was talking about the Irish and the Italians, assimilating, you go up there, the people are still very much engrossed in their ethnic identities. And then you have, in the millions every year who come into the United States legally. And then you have all this sort of off-balance sheet migration that is just thrown on top of that. But what's the real concern of our government? Oh yeah, that's right. It's shipping lanes. Shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Remember, our government is not incompetent. They just have contempt for you and everything you stand for. And so, if you want to look favorably upon them, their contempt can be dismissed as incompetence. That's the lens you want to look at it through. But I'll tell you, our government is very competent when it comes to moving arms to Ukraine, when it comes to running opposition, or running interference. Excuse me, my brain went dead for a second. Running interference for Israel on the world stage. They're very competent when it comes to destroying Iraq, when it comes to destroying Afghanistan, when it comes to destroying Libya, when it comes to destroying Yemen. Our government is very, very competent. Those are the logistical feats required for us, the United States, the middle part of North America, to project that kind of destructive power on the opposite side of the world. Think about it. We also destroyed multiple cities in Japan, completely leveled them, at the same time that we were destroying Germany. And in the 1950s, we had a president who was concerned about the border, and illegal immigration as a problem was solved rather quickly through Operation Wetback. But illegal immigration, as we call it, is not a problem for the ruling class. It's a solution. It's a solution to having a non-compliant populace. Because if you can bring in these migrants, and you bring in very vulnerable people, very, very poor people, and you create these ethnic enclaves where people really don't know what's going on with the country and with big issues like politics, they're much more worried about how am I going to get my daily bread. You end up with people who are very easy to control and who are very compliant. And so you want the population to be as compliant as possible. So if you dilute the people who put up a fit, while at the same time politically persecuting select individuals to make examples out of them, and at the same time you replace that non-compliant population with people who are very passive, with people who are basically thankful for whatever crumbs fall off of the elite's table, then you have a plan for maintaining your power for years to come. But it's a constant battle because, as I said, the more generations pass, the more any population is going to become native. They'll be the new natives. Even if they're different, like the Irish and Italians, they're not English. Even though the Irish and the Italians replaced those of English descent in this country, as an example, partially. There's a lot of it. It's a big story, but it's a lot more complicated than that. But I'm using it as an easy example that everyone will know. As far as the elites are concerned, that's just as bad as having the old native population, because that is what they are now. And in other words, the Irish and Italians are now considered white. And white is just a catch-all term for, I guess, those who have the potential to present a problem. They are the core group, a group which must be disrupted culturally. They are sort of, they're the core culture, and they must be disrupted by manipulating the so-called the others in the country. And while blacks in America are an example of a native culture that does meet a lot of the parameters that I set out earlier of why you need this outgroup, why you need to bring in this new humanity to upset the balance of power, to shift power away from what is considered to be the white culture, which is always a changing term. Because a lot of the people who are considered white these days were not considered white back in the day. That's why when you read the left's documents, like this leak that James O'Keefe just got from IBM talking about whiteness, they talk about whiteness as a metaphysical concept. It's not literally people with white skin. It's not literally people of European descent. There's no arbitrary cutoff there. They use the term white to refer to the core American culture, whatever commonality exists between us. And America, geographically and culturally, very, very diverse. There's very different. Someone from the Pacific Northwest and someone from the South. Those different cultures, even if they have the same last name, the same eye color, the same skin color, and the same hair color. But there are certain commonalities that run through American culture, and is the strengths, the common strengths, that they see as a threat, and that's what gets labeled as whiteness. And so that's the problem with these Hispanics, is that it's always a fight against the clock. They have to keep bringing in more and more Hispanics, because the longer the Hispanics are here, the more quote-unquote white they become. You look at someone like Jeff Bezos, who, politically, wouldn't say I'm on his side, but, you go back to, probably the 50s or something, maybe, when his family came here. He would have been a quote-unquote Hispanic. He would have been one of these, one of these outsiders from an outgroup. But you give it enough time. You look at Jeff Bezos. He's got lily white skin. He's a billionaire. He's in, he's now a part of the elite class. Different. But my point is that Jeff Bezos is indistinguishable from any other white man, despite the fact that he is of Latin origin, Cuban, I believe. And sometimes people like to draw an exception, like, oh, well, Cubans are the exception, and that's a different. Well, guess what? There are people who look like the people from Cuba in every other Latin American country. Ricardo Montalban was not a person of color. I hate to break it to you. And he was Mexican, but hate to break it. He was white. Javier Milei down in Argentina, that's a white boy. Jair Bolsonaro, white boy. Then you got a lot of mestizos that come in, sure, because those tend to be part of the underclass, the poor. That they are, they're not minorities, but they are the underclass in these Latin American countries. Oftentimes, not all of them. I mean, you look at Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez was someone of a native background, Native American background, and he became the leader of his country. But these mestizo types of a couple of generations, they, in, I hate to use this term. It sounds so biological, but like crossbreed with quote unquote white presenting people. Guess what? They're indistinguishable. They grow up speaking English in the house. They join a Protestant church. Guess what? They're a part of the white culture. And so they have to bring them in at faster and faster rates. That's why these records are important. And I've gone on for too long at this point, and frankly, I have to go use the bathroom. So with that said, I will see you folks back here as soon as I can.